Amir, I'd love for you to address this because back in 2017, when you were with the Lions, you took a knee to protest police brutality during the playing of the national anthem, and you have described the blowback that you got. What about that? And now hearing about so many other players saying that they are going to protest some of the social injustices during the playing of the national anthem, what maybe can they expect, and do you expect it to be any different than it was before?
I'll say this. I participated in a few protests. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and I participated in a few protests down there. And what I did see was there was a lot more diversity in those protests than in the past, where before this was completely seen as a black issue, right? And people are starting to understand that this is a human issue. And when I protested back in 2017 during the national anthem, when Kaepernick first started taking the knee, I got a lot of pushback. A lot of people who I thought were in my corner kind of, flipped on me. And of course, some fans were very harsh towards me because of that. And I would say for the people who are intending to protest this year, expect a lot of the same. But what we have to do is understand that awareness is the goal. It's not to upset people. It's not to be an individual or stand away from your team. It's about bringing awareness to a real issue that's been persisting in this country for hundreds and hundreds of years. Mm-hmm. And Martin Luther King always said that protest is the language of the oppressed and unheard. And, systematically, a lot of black people, people of color, minorities, any demographic really that's seen as a minority in this country have been unheard legally for a long time and physically as well. So to make a physical demonstration, to bring awareness towards that, I think is a respectable act, as long as it's peaceful, of course. But expect a lot of resistance. But like I alluded to earlier, before you can have peace, there must be war. And war doesn't always mean fighting and bullets flying. Sometimes it's just a war between words, a war between social groups. And I think ultimately we're moving in the right direction, though.
Yeah, I agree with Amir. Like you said, these issues are important. We must start talking about them. We must continue them. It's about awareness. It's about knowing what our history truly is. It's crazy how we didn't learn about any of this stuff growing up in school. Hopefully, now we start to see more dialogue in elementary schools and stuff regarding this. So just things like that. We got to keep it going, keep the dialogue going, keep the awareness high.
Hey, Eric, a day after, I remember watching, the Vikings released it on their social channel, but it was an incredibly emotional video you put out singularly where you clearly had it. Man, you were crying. You were just reaching for some type of solution. And then the next day, you were one of, I think it was released, the player video, where you all were telling the NFL what you wanted to hear. And you heard it from Commissioner Roger Goodell. Some of the things that he said, that the league had not been listening to players. Some of you guys, Tyrann Mathieu, some people said the commissioner's response was appropriate. But what do players want to see from the league now? Because you've seen you talked about what your team is doing. What do players want to see from the actual NFL itself?
I actually talked with the commissioner yesterday. So just that dialogue alone is just showing you that we are on the right path and we are trying to find solutions. But it goes deeper than, just acknowledging, that protesting was for. It goes deeper than that. We gotta now start to put, black people in leadership positions throughout the NFL. We gotta, coaches, GMs, behind in the NFL offices, media. It's an issue that we're dealing with across the nation, and I'm glad that it's addressed.
I think too, to piggyback off Eric's point is, when this issue translates from people being sympathetic to people being empathetic, that's where we're going to see change. And, I've mentioned our Players Coalition a couple times, and I can't tell you what that's done for me and my perspective. Had I not been in sports and had I not been around other athletes of color and listen to them and hear their stories, I wouldn't be able to have empathy for them because I don't know what it's like. But through sitting in these meetings and listening to their stories and listening to the instances that they've been put in, it's allowed me to be empathetic. And I think that kind of goes across our league. Our owners, as Amir said, are sitting in these meetings. They're listening to the stories that our guys are telling, and they're becoming empathetic, thus giving us immense support, both financially and through their actions. And I think, as Eric just said, through dialogue, our entire league can become empathetic for the people that are going through these tough times.
Yeah, I think the NFL holds great power, man. Every kid wants to be Kyle Rudolph. Every kid wants to be Eric Kendricks. Can't say they all want to be Amir Abdullah. I hope so. Hope so for sure. But just understanding that influence that we have on the youth and how malleable the youth are with picking up on things and understanding empathy as opposed to sympathy, like what Kyle, spoke about. I feel like the league can really carry that torch, and we can really spark a real psychological change in this nation, because make no mistake about it, it's a psychological war that we've been in. Obviously, you start off with slavery, you go through Jim Crow, you go through civil rights, all that. That was a long time ago, and we're in 2020 now, and a lot of that's incarceration, the mass incarceration movement, that's still persisting psychologically. So a great influencer or a great organization like the NFL has a great opportunity to seize this and to push the movement forward through action. And obviously, listening to what Roger Goodell said about before he wasn't listening to athletes' voices enough. That's great, and acknowledging that is the first step. But the next step, I think, is organizing with each individual team. Like Kyle alluded to earlier, we've been on the ground in Minneapolis doing this 3 years prior to anything even coming to the forefront to what it's been now. And just working and galvanizing all the teams together and working in conjunction with one another, NFL, NFLPA, players all alike. I think we have a great responsibility that can really move this movement a lot further, a lot faster if we seize that.
All right, Kyle, Amir, and Eric, thank you so much for joining us. And we felt it was really important to get a Vikings player roundtable together because you all are kind of at ground zero, so to speak. Minneapolis, of course, was a city where we saw George Floyd die and everything kind of jump off from there. And Kyle, I know you and Amir are in Minneapolis. Amir, you just got there. And Eric, you've been there. Kyle, could you just kind of let us know what the temperature, so to speak, the social temperature of the city is right now?
It's been a few weeks since Memorial Day, and obviously we saw the protesting immediately turning into the looting and the rioting, and I think it was important. I had the opportunity to go to George Floyd's memorial, and his family was adamant on the protesting being peaceful, and I think since his brothers got that word out and really tried to tell people that that's not what he would want, that's not what he stands for. We want it to be peaceful, and we're going to make a difference. Really since that point, everything here has been peaceful. Everything's been about bringing change to this community. This is home for me. It's not just where I play. This is where I live. This is where I raise my family. And so we're here full time. And, I've been able to be here over the last few weeks and try to help make a difference and start changing that social temperature in our community.
To that point, and Eric, I am a native of Minneapolis. I spent my early childhood there, so I know how interconnected that community is with the Vikings. It is the lifeblood for a lot of people when it comes to that city. Do you feel, as a member of the team, and all you guys can chime in, that it is important to lead not only in a time like this, but over the long haul to show people that, follow us and we can help you make a change?
Absolutely. Obviously we're in a different situation with our platform, so we want to use that to our best ability. But even when I just landed in Minneapolis a week ago, I saw people walking down the street with signs and stuff like that, and I immediately myself wanted to join them. And I felt like an energy to where everyone's starting to take a responsibility. Everyone's wants to come together to help this issue. Everyone's starting to be more educated on the subject, and it's good to see.
Yeah, I agree with Eric. I'm the shortest tenure Viking of any of the guys sitting here right now, but From the moment I got here, I knew really quickly that this is a Minnesota Vikings state. You know, a lot of the people follow in the lead of the Vikings, and not just how we play on the field, but our social community efforts as well. So bringing together a social justice coalition group of our own was really important for us to lead the charge and to direct, like what Kyle kind of alluded to, the protesting to be peaceful and effective for real reform and real change.
I was just going to piggyback on Amir, and he mentioned that social justice coalition, and for us as an organization, this has been something that has been at the forefront of our organization for a little over 3 years. A lot of people don't know our owners' story and the background of their family and the oppression that their family dealt with as Holocaust survivors. So our owners have made it a priority that we're on the forefront of this state. And, we say it all the time, a locker room is a perfect example of what society should be like. And it's a bunch of people coming from different walks of life, different backgrounds, working towards a common goal. So if we as Vikings can be an example to not only the Twin Cities community, but to the state of Minnesota, it's important for us to be out there and to show our support. For me as a white male, to listen, to spend time with guys like Eric and Amir and learn and have empathy for what they deal with. Otherwise, we won't be able to change.
Kyle, you talked about the long-standing social justice group you have there with the players. Was most of what you guys are doing and plan to do player-driven, or was it organization-driven?
It's 100% player-driven. There's a group of us that would meet regularly, and with the support of our owners that I mentioned before, and they've now donated over $5.5 million to this social justice reform here in our community. We meet and we come up with ways to make sure that we can impact this community. For me, a lot of the work that I do here in the state of Minnesota is around kids. Oftentimes people know about the work at the Children's Hospital, but what they don't know about is the work that we're doing, whether it's in South Minneapolis, in elementary schools and middle schools. One of the things that I said earlier, as this all kind of came to a head in Minneapolis, was I lived in Cincinnati in 2001 during those riots, during a very similar situation. And it's hard for me to believe that almost 20 years later, we're still living in this situation. And I want to do everything that I can to use my platform, to use guys like Eric and Amir and their resources to make sure that 20 years from now, when my kids are growing up and are adults in Minnesota, we're not dealing with this still.
Yeah, one of the best things about the coalition, is the fact that, like I said, our owners are backing us not only, financially, but we're in these meetings and we're deciding, what we think as a team is the most important to invest this money that they gave us to. What causes that maybe would have affected us in our adolescence, or maybe situations that we grew up seeing in our own lives. So we get to implement the change that we want. We discuss it as a group. We debate, we argue, we give facts, and it's a beautiful type of situation. And we're just strictly trying to make the impact in the community.
Yeah, just going back to what Eric and Kyle alluded to, this is 100% player driven. And but we are sitting in these meetings with ownership and administration, and they are listening. I think that's the most important thing that I've taken through this whole experience is how well they're listening and they're feeding off the things that we want to do with the money that they're giving and how generous they are with their time and obviously with their economics. I can remember back to last spring, we partnered with this group here called Project Success here in Minneapolis, and we took a group of kids from the north side of Minneapolis to Washington, D.C. to visit the Holocaust Museum and the African American Museum just to study up and learn a little bit more of the lineage of that history and a lot of things that we're bringing together, like a scholarship, a legacy scholarship in George Floyd's name to benefit African American students here in the city who are seeking higher education after high school. Those are things that are all player-driven ideas that couldn't come to fruition if we didn't have the type of ownership that we're willing to listen and to hear our perspectives on how we want to lead this reform.
We've seen reports where police officers have quit the Minneapolis police force. Others may quit. We're starting to see this now across the country because they're citing a lack of support internally and just pretty much outside hostility towards them otherwise. As young men who know that we've been raised as that police officers, that's what we call when we're in trouble. Is this an alarming development to you, or is it a situation where you're saying, well, if they don't want to be here, or if the way you're doing it has been improper, go ahead and leave. Let's get the right type of policing in here. And Amir, I'll start that question with you.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of systems that are persisting right now that I personally need to do a little bit more research on in terms of like the police union and how well their relationship is with each police chief in each district in the city of Minneapolis. And what you said was, a lot of police officers are quitting and things like that. And I think right now with 2020, how many things have been coming up in the forefront, so many things that we are seeing clearer right now. And I kind of alluded to this in another interview I was in. This is definitely the year of seeing clear. 2020 is no coincidence that 2020 vision in this year with everything that's coming to the forefront. And I think a lot of people are under pressure to look at themselves in the mirror, under pressure to change some things that have been passed down through hereditary lineage that they didn't really understand that they were doing subconsciously, whether that is racism or discrimination. And I think it's before you can have any peace, there has to be a great war a lot of times. And within those wars are a lot of deconstructing of systems. And I think we're just at the beginning of that. But I do find it a little alarming that policemen are, quitting. And there's a lot of talk about, defunding the police department, because I don't know exactly how that would look. But I know where we stand as a Vikings is just working on what we can handle right now to, affect change and letting everything around us sort itself out and then fitting in from their point on.
Yeah, like Amir said, there's obvious need for change. There's obvious need for systematic change. He talked about the union. The union is incredibly strong, and when you talk about officers, quitting, it's. I mean, obviously, being a police officer is a hard job. Like it's very difficult. They're answering phone calls when no one else, is out there available. So, I get that sense of it, but in the same time, you took an oath to protect and serve. So if you decide to quit, maybe that's not the job for you. We need to get people who, are willing to protect and serve and do what they have to do to keep people safe.
I think one of the things, and us as players, we talked about this in our social justice coalition meeting was, for me, sitting at my house in Minneapolis, thinking, how can I make a difference? For me, I have family members who are on the police force, who are good cops, who take their job very seriously, who are the true meaning of protecting and serving their community. So for me, it was like, how do I protect them? How do we get these bad apples, if you would, out of the police force? Because there are a lot of good cops in our community, in the state, and across the country. And I think one of the things that I found as I continued to research more and more were, as both Amir and Eric alluded to, are these police unions. And Eric and Anthony Barr had an opportunity to meet with Chief Rondo, the Minneapolis Police chief. And one of the things that he kept mentioning to them was how difficult it is for him. He could fire an officer on Monday, and then all of a sudden, a week, a month, 2 months later, that officer's right back out on the streets because he's protected by the union. So for us, as a team, using those resources that we mentioned before, not only providing our departments here with more resources so they can have more training, they can have a psychologist on staff. Now, you think of a police officer in the high stress situations that they're put in, yet they don't have a psychologist to talk to. Even we have psychologists to help us perform in high stress situations. And then, as I mentioned, the unions and just how powerful these unions are. And hopefully we can use our platform to help a guy like Chief Rondo, who's going after these police unions that are protecting bad cops.
What was that meeting like, besides the discussion about the police unions, you guys meeting with him? Because I'm sure he's coming under fire because 4 of his police officers are now charged for George Floyd's death. and everything that's kind of happened. What is it like in terms of dealing with that circumstance? You're trying to come up with solutions, and here's somebody who just might not have a good answer for you.
Yeah, it was the meeting was super informative. We obviously bounced questions around and things like that. But for me, it's it's hard for me to say that what the right answer is. You know what I mean? Me as a Viking, all I can ensure is that I keep trying to have these meetings. I keep trying to ask the hard questions. I keep trying to apply the pressure to see, what impact we can make in the community, what schools we can visit to improve relations. That's my job. As far as the systematic structure, that's another issue that we need to get into with voting and things like that. But other than that, I can use my platform, and we can use our relationship with the chief to just try to make things better.
As we see the NBA trying to figure out if and how it is going to return, we've recently heard a discussion when players went a conference call. Some players, Kyrie Irving, Dwight Howard, coming out and saying that now is not the time to return to professional sports because that will take the focus off of what we're actually talking about right here, what society is talking about right here. What are your thoughts about that with the NFL? Because this is the one major league sport that is really not impacted in terms of losing games or anything right now during this whole COVID situation and with what's going on in society.
Yeah, obviously there's the pandemic that we're going through and the safety of returning to sport. But in terms of returning to sports and bringing sports back, hampering the momentum that this movement has generated, I would disagree with. I think that sports would almost be, adding lighter fluid to a flame. When you look at sports and what sports represent, I mentioned it earlier, a locker room, specifically an NFL locker room, is such a microcosm of what society should be like. And I'll take that a step further. When you look at stadiums across the NFL on Sundays, and, I use US Bank Stadium, for example, we have 65,000 people that are packed in that stadium cheering for the Vikings. And it doesn't matter if you came from South Minneapolis or Wyche. You're there to root for your team, and you're going to just absolutely come together and enjoy victory, or you're going to be disheartened in defeat. And I think that's something that our world needs. And I think that's something that would only make this movement even stronger.
Yeah, this offseason, involving these issues that we've been facing, I've fortunately had the time to talk to people on other teams that I normally would never talk to. And they're regarding these issues. They're regarding what we can do, what we have done, just what we're thinking, brainstorming. And I think that taking that to the season, if we keep using our voices and keep using this platform that we got, it'll turn into almost like a competition amongst the league to do the best they can in these areas. And I think that it could be a beautiful thing because it forces us to keep each other accountable and to use that stage for good.
Yeah, I'm kind of back and forth on it. I didn't really hear the comments from Kyrie Irving until just this moment now. And I can see where he's coming from for sure in terms of what sports kind of do to this country. That there's such a big economic surplus for this country, for one, and the NFL rules the entertainment business in America. So I can see where that focus may be shifted. But like what Eric said, I think it's about controlling that narrative and really having those discussions with the commissioner, different owners around the league with how we're going to push forward with playing games and not forgetting about everything that's going on, incorporating the movement in the season to make this season that much more special. I think it'll take some organization to do that. People really putting their brains together to make sure that we capitalize on this the right way. I'm not sure exactly how that would look, but I think if we continue to push forward with conversation and action through campaigns or whatever the NFL decides to get involved with this movement, however they decide to get involved, that's the way that we can make the season still worth it while also working to change the the psychological and reform, pushing for reform around the nation. I think as players, there will be some division for sure. Just being honest. Me personally, I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. My dad was in the March for Selma, along with my aunt, for voters' rights. With Martin Luther King, my dad was there. I grew up in a home that's really big on Black history and understanding those things. And quite frankly, I am fed up. I am upset, and I want to see real change. And I would hate to see people kind of fall back into regular scheduled programming of living and just watching sports and just enjoying it without also getting a conscious message that, hey, who I'm watching right now stands for a certain thing when it comes to social equality and so on and so forth. So if we can make that the reinforcing thing while they're watching the game of football, I think you will be killing two birds with one stone.